Let me first say good morning and introduce myself. I'm Sue Klinger, Vice Chair of the MGFA Board. Those of you who have never seen me before on Facebook, here I am alive. I'm going to ask 4 of our patients to come up to the dais here. Obviously, among all of you, some of you are just now for the first time meeting another MG patient. And I run the New York support group, and I find that the most important thing as a patient myself is to meet other patients and share stories and understand that we're all in this together. We may have different stories and we may have experienced myasthenia differently, but we're not alone. You're not alone. There are people to reach out to and people who understand what you and your caregivers are going through. So this morning, we're going to start off with stories from the front line. I'm sure you all have stories. We're going to have an opportunity to ask these people specifically their questions of them. The 4 people are Rita Conley Pitts, who is a caregiver, Pamela Hyman, who is starting a support group in Virginia. Rita is from South Carolina. Dale McCann from New Mexico. Are you here, Dale? There you are. And Paula McGinnis from Southern Illinois. They've all agreed to come and tell their stories. Okay, so we have Rita, Pamela, Paula, and Dale. We're going to start with Paula, who has been, she's a patient, a former nurse, a neurology nurse of all things, who knew what she had before she was diagnosed, and has been doing an unbelievable job in an area where there are very few myasthenia, there's no myasthenia group, there hasn't been a walk. So I'll let Paula tell her story first.
I was and continue to be a country gal from a small town on the very southern tip of Illinois named Metropolis. And many of you, you're aware of Superman. And we actually have a Superman statue, and 2.5 blocks down the street is a Lois Lane statue. The story is told when the comic book was going to come out that our town was the only town in the United States named Metropolis. So the story is told that that's how it came to be known as the home of Superman. And I didn't know until last week when Sue shared with me the 60th anniversary Focus magazine, the connection that this little town or Superman has, and it is George Reeves, the original Superman, on the black and white series of TV that I watched in the 50s when I was growing up, was Superman. And we have in our Chamber of Commerce a picture of him, and he was in a soda shop. But George Reeves was the 1955 chair of the foundation. So I was amazed to find out that even though this small town, I did have a connection. But my story that I'm going to share with you, if I was to give a title to it, it would be Insurance Made Me Do It. Because one time I was very shy. I had to have help writing speeches for college class that I was taking. And I would have never dreamed of stepping out of my comfort zone to open up my life, let alone share that I had myasthenia. But I realized that no one walked in my shoes, as I do not walk in their shoes, and I only have one true God that's my judge. So it was an insurance denial for Ivig about 4.5 years ago that I decided to be my own advocate when the doctor's office got a denial. I continued to receive the Ivig that I'd been getting for 4 years. And I fought with the insurance, and I won the appeal. So I have not had any problems, and hopefully I won't, in getting the Ivig. It was through an insurance denial in 2014 when I almost went into a crisis that insurance denied another medication for myasthenia. And so I went to federal appeals with it. And of course, they denied it. I bought enough out of pocket in the process to see if I could take it and had a reaction. So I wouldn't have been able to take it. But I inherited my mom's perseverance. I have trouble accepting no, or I can't. So I pursue being my own advocate in the fight against what I think is right for not just myasthenia patients, for anyone. When my mind was very strong and my body was very weak in 2014, I decided to step out and raise awareness in our region of Southern Illinois, which does not have a walk. There's never been any awareness raised, and start the first walk. So on November 15th in 2014, I had the very first myasthenia walk. We had 70 people participated. 4 of us were myasthenia patients from Illinois. Then in 2015, we had our second walk. We doubled the participants. We had participants representing 4 states because where we live, it's no farther than 92 miles to reach 5 states. So my overall goal, other than raising awareness, participation, donations, has to bring a national walk to our region of Southern Illinois. Things were going along pretty well till December of 2015. I also have besides myasthenia, I have several other autoimmune problems, and another one is asthma. When the asthma flare comes, then the myasthenia goes downhill. Insurance denied my Alvesco that I'd been on 4 years. So they told me I had to go through a 3-step therapy. And I had become actively involved in being an advocate for Southern Illinois in helping the autoimmune organizations in Illinois to educate Congress, because there's 3 bills getting ready to come up in the Congress that have to do with the 3-step therapy in insurance. So I had already educated myself on that and the risk involved with the autoimmune problems. So I wrote my own letter to the insurance appeals department, sent it certified letter, And I received the Alvesco before I ever received the letter of appeal, or that they had reversed their appeal. And they gave me a prior off till the end of the year. So I say that insurance made me do it because I would have not been an advocate for myasthenia. I would have not stepped out of my comfort zone to be an advocate against my insurance. And yes, I have myasthenia, but it's not the end of the world. Because the life of having myasthenia has given me so many supportive friends that I would have not had. I realized the importance of the expression that I heard when I was growing up. Take time to smell the roses. Take time to look, listen, and feel of the creation that is around us. And it's a life that I know that if I'm out at the infusion center, I can look around and I know that there's someone worse than I am. I thank God that every morning that I can get out of bed and I have 2 feet to put on the floor, even if my legs might be weak. I know walking the shoes of myasthenia is the life that I can use in a positive way to bring awareness, participation, and donations for myasthenia gravis to help all of us that walk the shoes of myasthenia every day. Be encouraged today. Become your own voice of advocacy when you are able to help bring awareness for myasthenia. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Paula. Next, we're going to have Pamela. Right? Yes. Pamela Hyman from Virginia, who is a patient looking to start a support group. Is that right? Or you have started a support group now. Okay. Pamela, you're up next.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Pamela Hyman. I am from Cascade, Virginia. My journey started in 1989. I was pregnant with my second child, and I started having symptoms around the third part of my trimester. And it started with falling down. My hands would get weak. I couldn't hold things. And I was informing my OBGYN at that time. And he wasn't really sure what to do, but he was like, we'll wait to see, after you give birth. I gave birth, and things really started to act up. And all I knew was I was 20 years old, and I was falling down for no reason. And I had to plan how to get off of a curb. I had to hold things with 2 hands, like a child with a sippy cup, So we were trying to wait and see. So that was March of '89. In July, I had a surgery. And I remember the nurse asking me if I needed a muscle relaxer for nerves or whatever. But I was like, I'm fine. At that time, I was fine. I didn't need anything because I wasn't nervous or anxious about surgery. Well, what's supposed to have been a one-day, inpatient, outpatient type thing, I ended up having to stay overnight because when I woke up, they said that every time they would take the breathing machine or the tubes out, that I would stop breathing. And of course, they tried to figure out what was going on. But in Danville, Virginia, that wasn't quite the place for this. But my OBGYN, he was a really caring and observant doctor. So he sent me to a neurologist at UNC Chapel Hill by the name of Dr. James Howard. And I had the pleasure of meeting him, although I didn't know his aspect concerning myasthenia gravis, but I quickly found out. So actually, within a few hours after some tests, and I think he gave me Mestinon, and I perked completely up. I had symptoms with the drooping eyes, the slurred speech, the tiring in the jaws, just tired all the time. And mind you, I had a newborn. So in the morning when I would take her father to work and I would try to get home, and I had a stick shift, I had a Volkswagen. So there were some times when I would try to drive, I would go to put my foot on the brake and the clutch and my foot would get stuck in the air. So it was like, oh my goodness. And thank God nobody was behind me. And then the place where we lived, it was like a main street. And then I had 2 steps from the street, and then I had a long sidewalk, and then I had 2 steps to get on the porch, and a long wide porch with no railings. So in the mornings, I'm sure my neighbors thought at 8 o'clock in the morning, this heifer is drunk. Because I would have to keep her in a carrier, and I would get her to the porch, and I would be on my knees pushing her to the front door, and then I'd have to reach up and unlock the door and push the door open. So if you didn't know me, you just knew she is drunk this early in the morning, and with a baby at that, you know. So after going through some trials and finding, you know, what worked and tweaked for me, I ended up in a cyclosporine study. And I was just teasing Dr. Howard. He put me out because I couldn't get back in. But that was actually one of the things that helped me get on my road to recovery. I had a thymectomy, and I wouldn't let them do it until I turned 21. I had my daughter when I was 20, on March of '89, and from that time I met Dr. Howard after July of '89, so by August or so. But I was like, I'm determined, I'm going to at least get to 21, so if something happens, I could say I was 21, you know. And so my birthday was February 1st, I turned 21, and during that week, I had the thymectomy. And I met some beautiful people, even in the hospital at that time. You never know what you can do with what you're faced with. All I knew was I was in my 20s, and this could not be the end for me. So I was like, God, I know I'm crazy, but I need your help. And he did just that. So after treatments, I've always been on Mestinon. Even to this day, I'm on Mestinon. I've had plasma apheresis. I'm kind of funny about a lot of medications due to side effects, but that's my personal preference. I try to stick as much to natural things as I can. My husband now, he is my bulldog in my corner. Sometimes he can see when I'm tired, when I can't, because I'm always, as long as I feel I can, I will. But then sometimes there's a backside to that, because I had, like I said, I had a period of remission where I was able to do just about whatever I wanted. I went to work. I was a power walker. I could walk, 4.5, 5 miles in less than 30 minutes. I did Taekwondo conditioning, and I can say I had a very active life at that time, but I guess I overdid it. So my body was like, hey, okay, sit down somewhere. So I had a relapse in 2004. And when I went to the emergency room from work, because you have to go if you're on a job, they want to make sure it's not their fault and yours. Okay, so The PA at that time, she after she realized with my history, she politely gathered my things and was ushering me out the door. And she said, I wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole. Go see your neurologist. So I was trying to get back in at UNC Chapel Hill, but it was just too far of a wait for me, and I needed some help and attention then. The neurologists that were in my area, they weren't as versed. And so I got into Duke, so that's where I go to for treatment now, Duke University. My doctor is Dr. Joel Morganlander. He's very good, and we just kind of play it by ear. I've had, like I said, I've had plasma apheresis, and I do methadone. And I try to eat healthy as I can, clean and healthy. And I try to exercise. Water aerobics is my friend. Oh my goodness, it just, whoop. Yes, but I always say if you can, do. And if you can't, it's okay. But do what you can and what you feel like doing. But don't get down when it's those days when your body is saying, hey, I need a little rest. That's okay too. I love to laugh, and laughter is the best medicine. It can be your friend. And laugh at yourself when you're walking around looking like you're drunk and people are looking at you like you're crazy. You know, mess with them a little bit if you have to. Because no matter what you have going on in your life, you're going to always have some type of trial. But it's not what you go through, it's how you go through it. And I'm telling you, you will get through even the worst days. Just put a smile on your face and just keep it going. My mother, she had lupus. And at the time when I was diagnosed, it wasn't sure if there was a correlation between certain autoimmune diseases in families. My mother had lupus, I have MG, and my daughter, the one that I was pregnant with, she's pregnant now with her second child, and she's having some issues with Bell's palsy. But even with that, I have the opportunity to even tell her there are things you can do to keep yourself healthy, because it's all about what you do within your body, and it's just simple things, you know. So I'm just saying, have a good attitude about everything, even when you don't want to have a good attitude about everything. Keep a smile on your face, keep laughter, and have your bulldog in your corner. And mine is back there. And when you're going to the doctor, if they don't understand, educate them. Because just because they went to school for it, that does not mean that they know. They had to go through a whole lot. And sometimes, I mean, I'm learning more doctors now are more aware of MG. But when I first started, it was almost like a foreign language to them, you know, or either they would say, oh, we had a paragraph, but I can't let you treat me if I can't educate you. And even to dentists, I find that more of them are learning more. Even to my chiropractor. My chiropractor, he does well because sometimes I get tight and that really helps. And I educate them as well. So like she said, sometimes you have to be your own advocate. And if they don't know or you don't feel comfortable, it's okay to say, no, I can't let you treat me. Because their simple mistake could be your last day. So keep that in mind, but don't let it stop you. I'm just being real. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Rita Conley Pitts. Rita is a fellow former New Yorker who now lives in South Carolina with her husband. She's the caregiver.
Hi, y'all. I've been practicing that for about 9 years. I'm Rita Conley Pitts, and I am honored to be here sitting at the table with these people who have incredible stories. And the story that I am about to relate is probably one that you all have heard many occasions, many times in very different forms, but it's specifically about the bulldog. I am the bulldog. I didn't necessarily choose to be the bulldog. It has evolved. And maybe about 10 years ago, I met the man who is now Mr. Pitts, my husband. And we met in a church group. It was probably about a year and a half before we started dating. We sort of didn't want to do it, obviously, because everybody in the church knew Kurt, and I was the new girl on the block. And if things hadn't worked out, it would definitely be my fault. So we kind of snuck around like it was an illicit affair for a couple of months until actually the pastor's son spotted us in another town. And the news was out. So our story has been kind of an unusual story, I believe, right from the very beginning. But the reason I'm here is to share exactly what it does mean to be a caretaker. In thinking about this particular conversation that we're having right now, and in several of the conversations I've had with folks back home, I realize that actually we're all caretakers. We're all meant to be each other's support team. And in the ideal world, we are. The ideal world is not the one we live in, though, as we know. And so we've heard Paula talking about being an advocate with insurance. We've heard Pamela talking about being an advocate with doctors. And I have to agree totally with both of these ladies. I don't have to be the classic caretaker that I had thought was the word years ago before I ever met Kurt. I don't have to watch Kurt. I don't have to be responsible for Kurt in so many ways. This man is a military man. He served actively in the military for 30 years. He had another career after that with the Naval Hospital for 20 years. The man knows how to take care of himself. He washes his own socks. He takes care of his own underwear. For the most part, he even cooks food for us, for me, when I come home from work. So yeah, being his caretaker in the classic sense is not exactly what it's all about. What I do for Kurt is what, Pamela, you are referring to for folks in your immediate life as well. I kind of watch when he's tired. Sometimes he doesn't know that he's tired, or sometimes he is tired and fights against it because he thinks he shouldn't be tired. I'm very careful about the social activities that we plan and the trips that we plan. I happen to be a doer. I like moving about, and I have recognized that that's not always the best thing for both of us. And as a result, there are times when I can see something all the way down for months in advance, and I can talk to Kurt about it, tell him how excited it is, and I can see the look on his face saying, whoa, this is not for me. I read him, and I find it my obligation, my duty, actually, to read him. And I'm not always right, but more often than not, I am. One of the things that we've started doing maybe a couple of years ago was actually going to doctors' appointments together, his doctor's appointments. And it turns out, as you have said, Pamela, that a lot of doctors really are totally unfamiliar with myasthenia gravis. And I don't know what kind of background they've had in med school a while back, but I do know that the very doctor that Kurt was first going to when he and I were married showed definite signs of just not listening to Kurt and not responding the way I thought the doctor should respond. And when we talked about it, Kurt was reluctant to leave this doctor. He had been his doctor for a couple of years. And it was with a lot of encouragement that we did leave this doctor just because. And there's no sin in it. There's no crime to it. It's simply if you're not getting a doctor who responds and recognizes what you're talking about, that's not the doctor for you. And you really do need to find someone who can. And in one of the wonderful things about having a support group, and I encourage, if in fact there is not a support group in your area, to do whatever you can to get one going. Well, we happen to have a really strong, wonderful support group. It's the Charleston Low Country Support Group. Janet Miter, I don't know, I can't see right now if you're even in the room. I suspect you are. I see you. And Julian Carnes were the two who started the support group in our area maybe about 5 years ago. It's growing. It's a strong support group. And oh my goodness, I cannot tell you how much I have learned about myasthenia gravis. I can't tell you how much Kurt has learned about myasthenia gravis. So it's not as though just because you have myasthenia gravis, you're going to know all about it. There really is not a whole lot on the internet, for example, or in textbooks that really can define for you what myasthenia gravis is, as well as when you actually are listening to folks sitting at the table on a Saturday morning telling you what they've experienced the week before. It is mind-boggling, breathtaking. And it is such a fabulous example of people who are strong, who are encouraging each other, and who are real support for each other. It makes me teary simply because I don't think I've ever been in a situation where I have seen such caring and loving for people as I have in our low country myasthenia support group. And so I really encourage you, for me as someone who is kind of relatively an outsider to this disease, to be able to be exposed to this kind of support and this kind of suffering, honestly, that people who go through myasthenia gravis have. And the dignity and the encouragement and the grace is always, I always take this home on a Saturday and say, Kurt, you know what? We are just lucky to be in this part of the world, in this part of the country, to have this kind of support. I also go to the doctor's offices with a notebook, actually. And now the notebook takes notes. I started this in 2014. And so we have a series of, actually a history of Kurt's visits. Kurt is actually one of these people who happen to be extremely lucky in that when his diagnosis was made, it was made accurately and it was made quickly. He actually had MG before he and I were dating, and that was one of the things that came up in the conversations as we realized that this was more than, you know, let's go to lunch, that this was getting to be a serious situation. And he did tell me that he had a disease called MG, and that it was not one that was going to go away, and that as he got older, it was probably going to, the signs were going to increase. I did some research on it, and as I said just a few minutes ago, there wasn't a whole lot of research there, but I realized it was a disease that that could be under control. He certainly looked healthy and handsome and sexy, and I thought, you know, I'm just going to take a chance with this one. And I'm really, really so glad 10 years later that I did. There are times when he is tired, as I said before. There are times when things just are not going all that well, but he's got a terrific inner spirit. He's got the grace of God that shines through him. He has humor. You're so right, Pamela, about humor. It really gets you through so many things. There's also that situation now that we're coming into where he's wobbly. We're using a cane for the first time. Although he looks very Kurt, stand up and show everybody how dignified he looks. He's going to hit me with that cane. I know it. So, but that is something that we do have to experience, and we do have to kind of get it under our belt somehow. That there is wobbliness. There are times when you look like you're walking out there and you're drunk, and it is an embarrassment that, you know, we kind of have to just kind of grin and bear it. It's part of the whole thing. And if you can do it, and I am telling you, I am not talking from personal experience. I don't know how I would do it. I hope I would do it the way Kurt does it. Again, with dignity and grace. And, but here's what I do know. I do know that honestly, caretaker title is not just mine. Kurt is as much a caretaker of me as I am of him. And that's my belief and his belief as well, that we actually are meant to be caretakers of each other. And so there are lots of things that we can do to help each other in any situation. I'm going to just fast forward to one more thing I want to say before I leave you all, and this is a very pragmatic note, and that is legal papers. Legal papers, it's essential that we all have our legal papers together. So if you have your will, your DNR, according to the state in which you live, because in every state it's different. Your living will, again, according to the state in which you live. You also have health records that are very accessible to someone if you have to leave. And that's if Kurt and I happen to get into a car accident and I'm in a coma and Kurt's not, somebody's got to follow through on that. Get those papers together, get them in a file box so that someone can come to your house. You can tell your daughter, your neighbors, whatever, there's a box in the back room and it's the one that you will give to whoever is your official caregiver. I cannot tell you how important that is. I can't stress that enough. Your finances, somebody has to have a power of attorney, durable power of attorney, as well as a health power of attorney, two very distinct legal documents. So if you have those, there's about 6 or 7 of them. If you have them all together, and you can do it through LegalZoom.com if you don't have your own lawyer, but I'd absolutely encourage you to do that. It gives us very much peace of mind to know that when Kurt and I are traveling, for example, everything would be worked out the way we want it to, the decisions that we have made. So caretaking is a very broad title. It encompasses a whole lot, and it is something that I feel is an honor. Now, of course, he's got a really big head right now, and I'm just telling him, this is all show, Kurt. Don't let it go to your head.
Feedback. Thank you, Rita. And last but not least is Dale McCann of New Mexico, who is a support group leader in Albuquerque.
I'm Dale McCann, and I'm a retired power plant operator, and I don't do things like this. I know how to operate equipment. I'm really good at that, and I've never been a public speaker, and at first the thought of doing this kind of scared me, but then I realized that everybody out here that's listening to me right now is, due to MG, is my friend, and I'm their friend. So I felt like, what's the big deal? I'm a storyteller. I can get out here in front of a whole bunch of friends and I can talk about things. And I was diagnosed with MG in 1998. I used to be able to kind of just zone out when I'd get tired, and my eyes would just, I kind of thought it was like a kaleidoscope vision. Then I decided to come back to life and everything went to normal. Well, one day I did that and I've had double vision ever since. I had ptosis in my left eyelid. It was almost completely closed. And so I called my wife, Shirley. She's sitting in the back. And I told her, I says, Shirley, I can't hardly see. I said, can you see what you can do to get me a doctor? Because I was one of those people that never goes to doctors unless you just absolutely had to. And just, I hated calling doctor's offices. So Shirley called up and called me back a little later and said that she had an appointment with an eye doctor for me the next day. And so I was driving over to the eye doctor's office, and I had 2 things going on in my mind. First was, God, I don't want to have to wear glasses. And the next one was, you know, what the heck kind of eye doctor is going to see me the next day? You know, this guy must not be very good. So I went in and I became one of the fortunate people with MG. My eye doctor, Dr. Anderson, he took a look at my eyes, ran some tests, and then he drew a blood sample. And as I was leaving, he told me that you've either got myasthenia gravis or brain aneurysm, and we'll know in a week. And so I spent a week on pins and needles trying to maintain my just super even keel because I did not want to explode that aneurysm that might be up in my brain. And one of the guys at work, he's one of those people that's always capable of bringing the worst out in people. And sure enough, I blew up about a week after I'd seen the eye doctor and just was furious with him. And a little while after I calmed down, the phone rang, and it was Dr. Anderson, and he says, have I got good news for you? You've got MG. And I went on the internet and did a little research, and I found out, yes, indeed, MG was good news. So I've always been really happy about having this. But I also learned one other thing. You have to be careful about what you ask the old boy upstairs for, because he'll grant it, but he's got a sense of humor, and I didn't have to wear glasses. I spent a lot of time on the internet trying to find out about myasthenia gravis, and back in 1998 it was actually easier then than it is now, because there was some mailing lists that were really good, and I found one that a man in Arizona was running that was mostly concerned with ocular MG, and that's been my main afflictions and stuff. And I was able to learn just a tremendous amount reading the comments that people had there and get a real good understanding of the disease, and I was really fortunate that way. My first neurologist was the head of the department, and very unapproachable man, and he put me on prednisone and mestinon, and due to my research, I'd come in to see him, and I'd have suggestions about things that I wanted to try, and he didn't appreciate that at all. You know, it's like, you listen to me, I'm the neurologist. And so I kind of got desperate, and I was searching around. I went to see a neuro-ophthalmologist in Albuquerque, and he was kind of curious why I wanted to see him, because I already had a neurologist and I had a diagnosis of MG. But, and I told him I was kind of desperate because things weren't working right. And so he sent me back to the medical organization where my neurologist was for some more tests. And my wife Shirley went with me, and we're sitting there, and this newly minted neurologist, she comes into the office, and they didn't have the equipment to run the tests that Dr. Carlo wanted run. But I could talk to this doctor, and she left the office for a few minutes, and I looked at my wife and I said, "Shirley, she's a neurologist, didn't she?" And Shirley said, "I think so." So she walked back into the office, and I asked her, "You're a neurologist, right?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, can you be my neurologist?" And she said that would be great. So Dr. Sally Harris became my neurologist, and she's by no means a specialist in myasthenia gravis. Her grandfather had MG, so she had some knowledge about the disease. And she became my advocate, and things started going. You know, I started on Imuran. It was helping quite a bit. I was taking vast quantities of mestinon, and she was okay with that. As you know, I experimented with levels, and she pretty much let me dictate everything that we wanted to do. I decided I wanted a thymectomy. She got me scheduled for a thymectomy in early 2000 and I had my thymectomy, and over the period of a year and a half or whatever, I kept decreasing my drugs, and finally I was off the Imuran, no more prednisone. I keep a bottle of mestinon around just in case I get really fatigued, and I'll pop one pill. But you know, ever since about 2002, I've been drug-free, but I've never gotten rid of the double vision. And as a power plant operator, you have to work shift rotation. And the job as a power plant operator is also highly stressful, because you never know what's going to happen out there in the grid. It's equipment. It can break, and you have to be really quick on responding. So it was a real stressful job. And we knew that I needed to get about 4 years, a little over 4 years in to reach a point to where I could qualify for a 30-year retirement. So every day of vacation that I had would be used up a day at a time, where I just couldn't go to work, and I'd call in and take a day off. So my wife and I, we went for a number of years without ever even being able to take a vacation and go travel and do anything. And Shirley was just really special to me, because she put up with that stuff, and she understood. And see where I am because I'm not reading. um, it's been just my journey on that's been just really pleasant and wonderful, and I can't help but thank Shirley, my doctor, and Sally Harris, and at the time I was diagnosed, we had a chapter of MGFA in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and so I was real fortunate to be able to go to that. Okay, I went to the meetings there, and I found out the benefit of the support groups and stuff, because it was really nice to be able to meet people with MG, see somebody that was better than I was off, somebody that was worse off than me, people that had been worse off and that were now better than I was doing. So I knew that there was a lot of hope out there, and that however position I was in, it would change later, and probably for the better. And the chapter ended up folding before I could ever do anything to help. And so we got went for a long time in New Mexico without any support groups or any kind of way to communicate with anybody. In around 2010, a gentleman named Harvey came down with MG. He got a hold of MGF, and we got letters, and about 15 of us got together and started a new support group. And about 2.5-3 years ago, the leadership of the support group kind of fell into my lap. And once again, it's something that I never really thought I'd ever do, but something that I'm doing. And one of the things that we've done in New Mexico, because we're a really vast, large state with a small population. We have 2 million people living in the state and about 1 million people in the metro Albuquerque area. And so we don't have a whole lot of people with MG, and it's hard to contact anybody. And one of the things that we ended up doing, I put together a website locally because I never felt like I could contact the Myasthenia Gravis Foundation. So I put together a website as a fishing line to let people in Albuquerque or in New Mexico know that there was others with MG and that we could have a support group. And then last year, our local TV station, they were put out the word that they were going to have a health and wellness fair. And we were able to secure a booth, and so for a couple of days, we had a big banner that advertised our support group and Myasthenia Gravis, and we had a whole lot of people come by. Probably 25 to 50 student nurses came by. Now they know at least what MG means, and some of them really indicated that they wanted to study and learn some more about it in their learning. And so that's one of the things that we've done. And I've been here this yesterday's support group leaders discussion that we had. I've already learned so much, and I'm going to go back home now. I know a lot of things that we can do to try to increase the membership and get the word out better. And I'm really pleased with the new direction that MGFA is going to. It's become accessible. I never realized that you could actually talk to somebody from MGFA, but a couple years ago we were driving on a vacation and the phone rang. A gentleman named Frank said he was with MGFA and asked if there was anything he could do to help. And that brought me into the fold to where now I'm communicating with MGFA, and I'm really, really pleased with what's going on. I really want to thank the board. I want to thank Nancy. Everything is just, it's looking up now. So I think progress is going to be made. That's all I can say. And thank you.